If you're like a lot of people, you understand the importance of fire safety, but maybe you haven't found the time to do anything about it, like map an escape route or learn how to use a fire extinguisher. It's one thing to know how important fire safety is, but it's another to incorporate safe behaviors into your everyday consciousness. In this program, we'll take you through some of the specifics of fire prevention and safety that you and everyone you work with should be aware of. We'll show you some simple everyday fire prevention tips, when and how to use fire extinguishers, and safe evacuation practices you should follow in the event of a fire. I'm here with Alan, who's going to get us started today with some do's and don'ts of fire prevention. Alan is the facilities technician at this office/warehouse. Now, I know that fire prevention awareness has been a big focus of yours.
It is. One of my roles here is to properly train all of our employees so that we can keep a fire from ever happening in the first place.
What are some of the specific things that you and your coworkers look out for when it comes to fire prevention?
Well, electrical issues are a big concern. Let's start with extension cords and outlet strips. Extension cords in general should only be used for temporary power. Here are a few things to keep in mind. If you've got a worn, cracked, or damaged cord, get rid of it. Extension cords are not that expensive and it's not worth the risk. Here we have a 2-prong extension cord. You never want to put a 3-prong plug into this, even if you're using an adapter. If you've got a 3-prong plug, use a 3-prong extension cord. The 3rd prong is a ground, which provides an additional level of safety in preventing fires and electric shocks. And you want your extension cord to be rated for the capacity of the equipment you're using. Check the cord's amperage rating. This is indicated right here as A, or amps. Amperage measures the amount of electricity used by an electrical appliance. So you need to add up the amperage of all the devices and make sure the total of all the combined appliances plugged into the cord stays within the cord's rating. Drawing too much power through a wire can cause it to overheat or even melt. And look for the UL trademark. This means the cord has been approved by Underwriters Laboratory. You should only use cords that carry this mark.
Okay, now sometimes I'll see multiple plugs going into a single receptacle. What is the rule of thumb about that?
Good question. You certainly want to avoid overloading circuits. The safest thing is to plug your equipment directly into an outlet. Now let's look at a couple of examples. These are things you don't want to do. Never use these multiple outlet plugs. You can create what I call an octopus. Instead, use an appropriately rated outlet strip and plug it directly into the outlet. And when you're using an outlet strip, you want to follow many of the same guidelines we discussed earlier with extension cords. Check the power strip's amperage rating, again right here. And only use power strips that carry the UL trademark. You also never want to take additional power strips or extension cords and plug them into each other for the sake of creating additional outlets. I call this a daisy chain, and it's a dangerous thing to do. Again, it could lead to an overloaded circuit, which poses a fire or shock hazard. You should also know that not all power strips act as surge suppressors. A surge suppressor has the capacity to divert temporary power surges back to the ground.
Okay, we're going to switch gears now and talk about space heaters, which can be a real hazard if not used properly.
Definitely. Well, first of all, John here has been kind enough to let us use his cubicle.
Thank you, John.
Now, we do try to keep a comfortable temperature in the office, but for certain people it might be a little too cool, so we do allow space heaters, but with certain restrictions. First of all, the space heaters are not allowed to have any open coils. Those are the coils that glow. This means that there has to be a screen or bars that cover the heating elements. The heaters are required to have a safety cutoff feature that activates if the heater is tipped over. And we require that heaters are located at least 3 feet away from any combustibles such as paper, cardboard, or cloth. Everyone needs to look around their desk or workstation and maintain a free space around their heaters at all times.
Okay, so no open coils, a safety cutoff feature, and no combustibles within 3 feet of the space heater. Any other guidelines?
Yes. When employees leave the offices, they are required to turn off and unplug the space heater, and not just at the end of the day, but during lunch or for any extended period of time. Also, the space heaters need to be directly plugged into an electrical outlet.
That's a good point. I assume you want to avoid any situation where the space heater could cause a fire.
Exactly.
Most work environments have a kitchen or break room like the one we're in now, right?
Correct.
Now, to that end, what do we need to be careful about in this area?
Well, for starters, we keep the coffee machine on a timer so it isn't accidentally left on for extended periods of time, like overnight or over the weekend. And I know this sounds simple, but we keep paper goods such as paper towels, paper plates, away from anything that gets hot. So we keep our paper goods over here, and we have our toaster oven and our microwave over here.
Well, speaking of microwaves, people really have to be careful and follow the instructions when using a microwave and not leave items unattended. I once heard about a fire where someone thought they'd pressed 1 minute and they accidentally pressed 1 hour instead.
You know, stories like that almost sound ridiculous, but that sort of thing happens a lot more than you think. You know, we're all very busy here and we all have our regular jobs to attend to, so these sorts of safety issues can easily get overlooked.
Well, to that point, what do your employees do to remind each other about these issues?
Well, one thing we do, and it doesn't take much time at all, is that we assign specific jobs to certain people in the office. For instance, it might be my job to make sure that the copy machine is turned off at the end of every day. And this also applies to the industrial equipment we keep in the warehouse.
And what if you're out of the office one day?
We have people assigned as backups, and we have a process in place so that if someone is going to be out of the office, their backup is notified.
All right, well, this has been very helpful. Thank you for showing us around, Alan.
Glad to do it.
We're going to switch gears now and move from fire prevention to fire extinguishers. I'm joined now by Brian. He is a firefighter who works in a major metropolitan area. Welcome, Brian.
Well, thanks for having me.
So, Brian, what can you tell us about when we should and should not be using a fire extinguisher?
Well, you think of a fire extinguisher as a tool to control or put out a small fire until the fire department gets there. Now, a fire extinguisher isn't hard to use, but during a fire is not the time to try to figure it out. We want you to take some time beforehand, get some practice, and learn how to use it safely.
Absolutely. I understand that using a fire extinguisher the wrong way can actually be worse than not using a fire extinguisher at all.
You're absolutely right.
You could cause the fire to spread, or you could delay your evacuation, which could be very dangerous.
That's correct.
All right, now I should also point out that different companies have different procedures for reporting a fire. Some tell their employees to call 911 directly, others want their employees to call site security. So make sure that you know the proper procedure for your company. Sorry, Brian, go ahead.
Well, once you've got some training and some experience with a fire extinguisher, you can go ahead and try to put out a small fire. A couple of things you want to keep in mind, though, is you want to choose the right kind of fire extinguisher for the fire. Using the wrong type of fire extinguisher on a fire could make things worse or even hurt yourself. Second, when you're going in to put the fire out, we want you to stay low. Get underneath that heat and smoke. If you start to breathe in the heat and the smoke, go ahead and evacuate the building.
Right.
Another thing to remember is we want you to keep your back to an exit. We don't want to let the fire get between you and the exit, because if you can't put it out, you need to be able to evacuate safely. We don't want you to get trapped in there. We also want you to work with a buddy. You may need somebody to perform first aid or maybe go get another extinguisher. Another thing to remember is somebody needs to be alerting the authorities and making sure that help is on its way. The last thing is, if you don't feel comfortable doing it, or if you're unsure about your ability to use a fire extinguisher, don't try to do it. Evacuate and let the professionals handle it. That's what we're here for.
Now, Brian, a minute ago you mentioned using the correct class of fire extinguisher. Can you give us a run through of the various types of extinguishers?
Sure. We've got Class A. The Class A means that it's good for common combustibles, wood, paper, and even plastic. We've also got Class B. The B indicates that it's for flammable liquids, gasoline, grease, and oil. And then there's Class C. C indicates energized electrical equipment, and the C actually means that the extinguishing agent inside the extinguisher won't conduct electricity.
Okay, so what does that mean?
Well, you wouldn't want to use water to put out an electrical fire because the water can conduct electricity and you might get electrocuted. This extinguisher here won't conduct electricity, so it's safe for that type of fire. We also have Class D extinguishers, and that's for flammable metals. Probably something you're not going to run into in an office environment, but in an industrial setting, it might be helpful. Then we also have the Class K extinguishers. That's for your kitchen fires where you're going to have hot oils and grease.
Okay, now this fire extinguisher here I noticed says ABC, so it's good for those three first classes that you
Right,
mentioned.
this is for the common combustibles, the flammable liquids, and the energized electrical equipment.
So Brian, can you give us a demonstration on how to use a fire extinguisher?
Absolutely. Like I said, a fire extinguisher can be a little heavier and a little more cumbersome than you might think, so during an emergency is not the time to figure out how to use it. We want to practice beforehand.
Okay.
Now the acronym we're going to use is PASS. That stands for pull the pin, aim the extinguisher, squeeze the handle, and sweep side to side. And we're going to remember to stay low underneath the smoke and the heat while we're doing it. You want to give it a try?
Okay, let me go over this. It's easy to remember. Pull, aim, squeeze, sweep, right?
You got it.
Okay. Oh, you're right. It is heavy.
That's why we're doing this beforehand.
Okay, so I'm going to pull the pin,
Yep.
aim the nozzle.
Right, remember holding it right at the end.
Okay, I'm staying low, and then I squeeze and sweep. Ooh, that is a lot of power there.
Yeah, it caught you off guard.
Yeah.
Now, just because the fire's out, we're not going to just walk away. We're going to keep our back to the exit. We're going to keep our eye on the fire, and we're
Okay.
going to back away in case it reignites. We can put it out with what's left in the extinguisher.
Okay, and when you do this, you need to make sure and tell a supervisor, right? Because they need to refill the extinguisher.
Absolutely, so it can be used the next time.
Okay, thank you so much for your time. It was very helpful.
Well, thank you for having me.
Okay. Now that we've gone over some fire prevention tips and we've shown you when and how to use fire extinguishers, I'd like to focus on some safe evacuation practices you should follow in the event of a fire. First, be prepared. Know where to find your building's alarm boxes and fire extinguishers. You'll also want to be familiar with your building's escape routes and have alternatives in case your closest exit is blocked. Know your duties if you've been assigned specific responsibilities in an emergency. When you see a fire, first activate your building's fire alarm system. This will alert the building's occupants to the danger. Even if it's a small fire, pull the alarm. It's better to have the fire department show up and not be needed than to have them arrive too late. Of course, if your company has a different policy in place, follow the specific procedures your company has set up. That might mean calling security or calling 911 directly. When the fire alarm sounds, take it seriously. You might assume it's an error or a drill, but you never know. It just might be the real thing. Workers who ignore warnings and stay at their desks are a major factor in the deaths and injuries that occur in office fires. So pay attention and treat any alarm like it is a real emergency. And you've heard this before, but it bears repeating. When you're evacuating, never use the elevators. Use the stairs. For buildings with fire alarm systems, the elevators will likely be disabled automatically. But in either case, take the stairs. You don't want to be trapped in an elevator that becomes filled with smoke, and you don't want the doors to open into an area that is engulfed in flames. If you have to evacuate through heavy smoke, stay low to the ground where you might find better air. Cover your mouth and nose with a wet cloth. Test any door before opening it. If you're right-handed, use the back of your left hand to test the temperature of the door in case it burns you. Do not touch the handle. Once you've evacuated, report to the designated meeting area. If you don't know where this is, talk to your manager and find out. Being able to account for everyone is critical. Rescuers' lives have been tragically lost trying to save people they thought were inside but had already gotten out. And never re-enter the building until the fire department has given the all clear. A couple of other things to remember during an evacuation. If you're with a visitor who's not familiar with the building's layout, you'll want to make sure they get out safely as well. You should also have a plan in place to help employees or visitors with disabilities evacuate safely. And this is worth mentioning too. When you're traveling or attending an event, whether for business or pleasure, have a safety awareness that extends to hotels, restaurants, auditoriums, or other gathering places. Be mindful of the exits and keep your cool in an emergency. We've learned a lot today, so let's take a minute to review some of the issues we've covered. Alan showed us some common sense fire prevention tips. If you're using a space heater, use one with no open coils and a safety cutoff feature, and place it at least 3 feet away from combustibles. Replace worn, cracked, or damaged extension cords. Don't overload your circuits by creating an octopus or joining extension cords together. Instead, use an appropriately rated outlet strip. And work with your management team to assign specific jobs to certain people so everyone knows exactly what their responsibilities are in maintaining a safe workplace. Brian explained how to read the label on a fire extinguisher, and he showed us the pass method of using an extinguisher. Pull the pin, aim low at the base of the fire, squeeze the handle, and sweep from side to side. Finally, we guided you through evacuation practices you should follow in the event of a fire. activate the alarm system, use the stairs instead of the elevator, report to the designated meeting area, and don't re-enter the building until the fire department says it's okay. Fire safety requires your attention every day, so stay aware, stay informed, and stay safe.